Hello and welcome outside. Tonight we'll be imaging the Cygnus Wall, which is low in the east behind me. The plan here is to integrate all night or until nature forces cancellation. We're using a Celestron 9¼ telescope, a Starlight Express H694 camera, along with a Starlight Express filter wheel and off-axis guider. To eliminate the rather heavily light-polluted skies that we have here, I'm also using an OPTOLONG QUADband filter in front of all of these other filters to see what kind of enhancement it's going to give of the image. If it performs as advertised, the final image should be something to see from our Bortle 7 skies. We'll be comparing this later on to an older image of the wall to see how much the quadband improves the picture. When using a longer focus main scope like we have here, it's important to use an off-axis guider, which you can see right here mounted on the Lodestar filter wheel. This is to prevent any kind of guiding errors between a guide scope and a main scope working at rather long focal lengths. And we're working at about 1450 millimeters right now at f6.5. Although this rig isn't extremely heavy, I still have it mounted on an Astrophysics 900 mount because it produces extremely accurate guiding and perfectly round stars. So I think it's important to have a mount like this when you have certainly a longer focal length instrument. With regard to the skies in Oklahoma, let's face it, they aren't great. Therefore, I'll be using a 2x2 binning of the camera in order to prevent an over-processing look in the final images. That's a rather interesting point to make when you're dealing with focal lengths like this and in skies this bad. So anyway, let's get to it and let's see what we get.
The camera assembly begins with the Starlight Express H694 camera, the filter wheel with our 1¼ narrowband filters, the off-axis guide port is right there. Next, we start with the Lodestar guider, then we have the Schmidt corrector focal reducer, and finally the OPTOLONG QUADband light pollution filter residing in front of the narrowband filters. The filter wheel contains the hydrogen, oxygen, and sulfur filters for the narrowband imaging. Assembling the parts, we begin with the focal reducer, which screws into the filter wheel like this. Next, we install the quadband filter at the end of the focal reducer. And finally, we'll complete our assembly by attaching the guide camera onto the off-axis guide port like this. It simply screws directly in. The assembly is now complete and ready to install onto the telescope. There you have it. Darkness has set in, and the telescope has been polar aligned. Our first image has just arrived. Seen here in the large window is the Cygnus Wall. Our view is from the hydrogen alpha filter at 656 nanometers with a 5 nanometer bandpass, after a single 5-minute exposure. Around the screen we have numerous windows providing data on the session. I'm using Sequence Generator Pro for image gathering. It provides many of the data windows seen here in black and gold. The two windows on the upper right of the screen are from PhD guiding, controlling the telescope. The PhD graph on the top right displays the guiding errors. When the red line, that is the deck guideline, and the blue line, the RA guideline, lay on top of each other as seen here, the guiding is quite good. The Sequence Generator software performs all the imaging operations and keeps track of all the exposures while providing the information necessary to maintain good quality images. Now our first oxy image has arrived, and we can see the presence of molecular oxygen is thin here, but it is normal. The filter works at 500 nanometers with only a 3 nanometer bandpass. Once all these images in each narrowband group are stacked, the final view will be considerably improved. The third filter is in of our set, which is ionized sulfur, which has just appeared. The filter is centered on 671 nanometers and has a 5 nanometer bandpass, like the hydrogen alpha filter. In the case of the Cygnus Wall, the presence of sulfur is greater than oxygen in the nebula, while both are far less than hydrogen. Hydrogen will always be dominant, but generally the doubly ionized oxygen will be more abundant than sulfur. Clearly, this is not the case, as evidenced in this data. We'll let the session proceed and take a look at the basic processing of the final images in Pixinsight. Opening Pixinsight now, we can take a look at processing. I mentioned previously the stacked image should look better than an individual one. Let's check out that assertion. Seen here is a single hydrogen alpha image. There's quite a bit of detail, yet it's still rather unimpressive. Now let's take a look at the stacked version. Please note the only processing done on the 3 stacked images is noise reduction. The detail has increased significantly, and it's not too bad. Moving on to the single oxygen frame. In this state, the amount of oxygen is barely visible. Yet, in the stacked frame, it looks much more detailed. Okay, now the sulfur image. It looks unimpressive, yet we do see more stars. Finally, here is the stacked sulfur image. The detail is vastly improved in nebulosity as well as stars. It's now clear that stacking does a lot of good to astronomical images. At this point, I'll be following my normal workflow as defined on the screen. 1. Make the 3 images linear. 2. Run noise exterminator on each one and combine the images into color. 3. Use channel combination to create a color image. 4. Run either automatic background extraction or dynamic background extraction. If the image is full of nebulosity, as this one will be, I will use automatic background extraction. 5. Run blur exterminator. 6. Do a gradient correction as required. 7. Permanently stretch with a histogram transformation. 8. Adjust the color in the image with curves transformation. 9. Run star exterminator to separate the stars, creating a starless image along with just stars. 10. Run curves transformation to adjust the colors to each of the 2 images for contrast and color. 11. Finally, combine the stars with the starless image in pixel math and make the final image enhancements and color modifications as you require. After running all the raw light images through weighted batch pre-processing and then applying noise exterminator to each stacked image, the masters of the 3 colors are ready to be combined into a single color image. I provide an in-depth video on pre-processing previously. You should check it out in order to understand this important and in fact critical process. Before combining the images into a single color frame, the 3 images should be made linear to each other. Here we must first find the image of the 3 that has the lowest median brightness value to use as the standard for the other 2. Using statistics, we will select the first image from the drop-down. We'll start with hydrogen. We see that it has a value as displayed here, and we'll make note of it. Next, we select oxygen from the drop-down. and make note of that median value. And finally, we select sulfur. Here is its median value. From this analysis, we now know that the hydrogen image should be our benchmark for linearization. We can close statistics and select linear fit. From the drop-down, select the hydrogen stack and click OK. Now, I'll move the oxygen and sulfur images on the screen to watch the process. The oxygen and sulfur frames can now be linearized. On the linear fit application, grab and drag the triangle onto the image. It will dim, that's okay. Go to the screen transfer function with the image selected and press the atomic button. The image brightness to the same level as the hydrogen frames. Do the same for the oxygen image. Now all three frames are ready to be denoised, again removing any linearization noise with Noise Exterminator. Select Noise Exterminator and drag the blue triangle onto each image. Be patient. Each denoise operation takes a little time. Since time is critical to us, here I will denoise the results and the image is already ready to go, and this is what it looks like. We can now create a color picture to determine if we want a standard narrowband image in red, green, and blue. That is, hydrogen equals red, oxygen is green, and sulfur is going to be blue. For this, we open channel combination. Be sure RGB is selected and the R, G, and B boxes are checked. Next, I will drag the hydrogen image into the R box, like this. Then drag the oxygen image into the G box. And finally, drag the sulfur image into the B box. And press the blue circle, meaning global, apply button. The image is too dark to see, so going to the screen transfer function, press the atomic button, the image appears in color. This is where we decide which colors to stack and use. It's a purely subjective process. I don't think this HOS image looks all that good. Therefore, I'm going to switch to the second possibility we just mentioned, sulfur, hydrogen, and oxygen, SHO. That's the RGB respectively. We'll redo the channel combination following the same steps as seen before. Now, pressing the atomic button, once more we have the SHO image. With this type of picture, I always click the chain icon to shift the colors to their minimum values. It makes the image a bit easier to work with and provides a better looking SHO image. Next, I run gradient correction, taking the defaults and dragging the blue triangle onto the image. Here is the result. We don't want to have to wait through the actual process to work. When done, I click the blur exterminator, take all the defaults and drag the triangle onto the color image. And this is what that looks like. We will end our step-by-step explanation of the SHO process here in order to do a side-by-side comparison of an older image of the Cygnus Wall to the one we now have. Let's see what that looks like starting now.